This is the Second Studio, hosted by the Architecture and Design Office, FAME. My name is David Lee, and with me is Marina Borderonnet. This week, our guest is Jason Sommers.
Jason is the president and founder of Crest Real Estate and co-founder of Discovolante Development in Los Angeles.
Yes, and this recording is a little bit different because we did it on site in a house that Jason recently completed. And if you've been a longtime listener of the show, you know that we've had Jason on before. And in that recording, the past one, we talked about Crest Real Estate, his expediting company. This time, we talk about his development company, and even more specifically, the house that he recently completed, called the Californication House. Links will be in the episode description. And it's a chance for us to hear the journey of him completing this house. It was 7 or 8 years in the making from the time when he first purchased the property. And so he talks about the lessons he learned completing the project and some of the design features. And what else did we talk about?
It was also very interesting to get his take on the overall process, not being on the design side, but kind of more on the client side, and how he thinks maybe construction and the industry, our industry, can change and improve on that.
Yeah. And it turns out we have the same thoughts. All right. Sponsors. Are you tired of juggling multiple pieces of software and struggling with spreadsheets that aren't made for the realities of design and architecture in 2023? Built by and for designers and architects, Programma's all-in-one suite of tools has everything modern studios need for every stage of a project. Mood boards, the world's best specification tools, procurement tracking, project management, and more. All smartly integrated and easily shareable and always up to date, reducing time-consuming double handling and costly errors. Share work in various formats from PDFs to client-friendly, up-to-date online dashboards. Join the ranks of leading studios using Programma today. Click the Programma link in our show notes to start for free.
If you're still using AutoCAD and separate 3D modeling program, then let me just tell you, stop that. Get with the times, people, and advance to a BIM computer program. The program we recommend is ArchiCAD. ArchiCAD leads the industry by enabling architecture and interior design firms around the world to 3D design. It's supported by innovative technology that expands as far as the imagination can stretch. As ArchiCAD continues to evolve with technological advances, architects can push that technology to their advantage while working in an accurate model. You can start your fully functioning free trial today by clicking the link in our episode notes.
This is the Second Studio with myself, Marina, and our guest, Jason. Here we go.
Creating this house definitely has been a dream 7 years in the making, right? Acquired the property in 2016. We're at the end of 2023. So
are you seeing the light at the end of the tunnel in a way?
You know, it was really interesting building this, where you went from this excitement to stress to more stress.
Yeah.
And then one more layer. But then as it started to come together at the very end, you start to realize that something that was truly a one-off concept started to come together, and we realized that through all of our experience, hard work, dedication on coming up with this design and what we did here, that we were really proud of it. And every day since then, it's felt incredible having this finished, completed, and at some point, you know, someone will buy this house. I feel very strongly about it, and I'm sure they're going to be an incredible person that is going to invite me over for many dinner parties.
Is that part of the deal? Like, if you buy the house, well, Jason can come every Friday night.
What's amazing is actually the person that bought Stanley 1 has become a really close friend. Wow. And, you know, fortunately for me, he's hosted me for Monaco Grand Prix the last couple of years.
Oh,
so,
wow.
You know, hopefully
nice.
This person, you know, has some sort of another F1. Maybe they own an F1 team. Yeah. That would be really nice.
If anybody's watching this,
yeah, this is this is a very car-friendly house.
So I guess one question would be, this is not the first development that you've done, right? Is this the second or third?
It's actually the seventh.
The seventh?
Yes.
Wow.
But a lot of them have not gone through to completion. And, you know, look, it's been over the last 10 years that I've been doing very intermittent development. And a number of them we've sold because, you know, our primary expertise and what allowed me to start doing development was our permit knowledge, right? Yeah. And the company Crest Real Estate that does the land use and entitlements for so many of these projects throughout the hills. So a couple of projects that I was able to acquire once I started investing in myself instead of the stock market was, projects that we took to permit and then people acquired them. So we added our primary value through our code knowledge.
Yeah.
And then we're able to work with incredible architects, which I'd love to, during this episode, talk about all the brilliant architects we've done our development projects with. It's kind of a target list of who we've been trying to, and then there's a future list that I'd still really like to do projects with. And, this is the third completed house of the 7 where we built it all the way through.
That's interesting. Yeah, because there's a lot of developers, especially in Los Angeles, but one of the most difficult parts of the process for them, and obviously you know this, is the beginning, the speculation of whether or not this property is worthwhile to purchase. And the big headache in LA is the code. And a lot of developers don't have the expertise that you have, so they end up buying something not fully knowing what can be done, which is a huge risk, or they have to find experts to help them with that, which is sometimes difficult to do.
Yeah, well, fortunately for us, Crest does work with almost every developer in town at this point. And the reason we did these projects over on this side of town was our developer clients, because we're very careful about, not stepping on toes and being very, separation of those two roles, because all we want to do, the bread and butter and the foundation of everything is Crest. That means everything to myself, my brother, our entire company, right? So we would never jeopardize our integrity in that company with any of this. Right. So what we did is we bought these properties. This is on the east side of Laurel Canyon, just past it. There had never been a property sold for more than $10 million on this side of Laurel Canyon. However, as you saw driving up to here on the street Stanley, it's probably the shortest drive of any street from a main thoroughfare to a promontory that has downtown to the ocean views, right? So any property that we've acquired has been full downtown to the ocean promontories, which is kind of the criteria, for me anyways, of wanting to make an investment. And that's because there's such a limited amount of those. And so we took on this area, first buying the Stanley 1 lot, and, there was nothing on these properties. Little shacks, but these incredible views, right? And so easy to get to on this dead end street. And so, Brandon Williams, Rainey Williams, and I really felt like, and those are my partners on that deal and this deal, who are the top real estate agents and really knowledgeable visionaries, and had done some development themselves. We got together to do these 2 projects. And we acquired, there's these 4 promontories on this hill that go directly north-south. If you look at a drone shot, they're just truly stacked on top of each other. So Stanley 1 was the first, right? And we wanted to just absolutely go to a level that other developers, besides at the extraordinary high end, had not gone, right? And that project was very celebrated. Lenny Kravitz was our interior designer. Austin Kelly, who is truly one of the great architects and one of the tragedies of our time, who was the founder of X10 Architecture, who really just one of the most heartbreaking passings in my personal life. Was one of his final homes that he designed. And we really went all in to create the market in this area. During that time, we acquired these other properties, right? Curson, which we're doing with Scott Mitchell, who's been on your podcast. I think many people would consider him probably the most acclaimed single-family residence architect in the United States right now, in terms of, hitting the true highest benchmark. So he's doing the project with us at the top of the hill.
And the nicest person ever.
Yes. He's remarkable.
He's a sweetheart.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I just visited him at his incredible ranch in Aspen, which is off of the beaten track. And we were there during the changing of the leaves. It was the prettiest drive I've ever taken in my entire life. And it's so far. And then you have to go down a dirt road at the end of it. And then it's this iconic just stream running through it in this, metal corrugated roof house. Just perfect for Scott and his dogs and his husband, Kellen. They're so sweet. But anyways, we're doing that project's gonna be done in January.
Okay.
And then we started this after we kind of knew we were going to sell Stanley 1. to build something this expensive. And then, so this architect is Vantage Design Group, who are great friends of ours and, you know, have really done some now pretty high level projects, and a young group. And they've really saw our vision of doing something very cutting edge truly edge with our razor edges all over the roof overhangs, you know, to emulate the Lautners and Chad Oppenheim, who is the architect for Stanley 3, which is going to be the next one, which is going to be permitted in January. And that one is a Chad Oppenheim. Has he been on the pod?
No.
Not yet.
In terms of, you know, cutting edge architecture, I think he's the top of the class, not just in the States, but really in the world. His talents are just immense. And we're doing a truly tropical curved Oscar Niemeyer-esque house where, you know, the house with the boulder in the middle, the Niemeyer one? So we actually designed it with a boulder that the windows are going to pocket into. It's going to be, and then the roof lines are very much like the Niemeyer. So you're going to have these 4 properties with the most iconic architects, you know, absolute no cost spare designs. And we took over this area that wasn't in competition with any of our other competitors. And so we were able to really, you know, do something that we're proud of. And I think people in the industry respect the chances we've taken and really taking the skills of working with so many talents for the last decade. You know, when you work in our capacity, we get to see so many projects, right? And if you don't learn something working with more than half of the AD 100 list in your career, just by being in the room and seeing their plans, you know, remember, I'm not educated in architecture from college. I was headed to be a lawyer.
Right. That's right. Yeah.
You know, through this whole path, it's really become, you know, design and architecture has become the new passion. Right. And it doing the development has really actually helped our consulting company because we used to be the experts of how do you get to a permit, right? But now I thought it was that simple. And then, you go build it. It's that easy, right? Oh my God.
What? You have no drawings?
So now we're able to consult with our clients, and even we're working with you on a couple of projects and expressing to the client how important it is for you to start your interiors, to have your construction drawings. The day we pull the permit is not the day you start construction. The day you pull start your construction is when you are dialed in. Right? You have everything figured out, and that's the way to succeed, especially in today's age with construction, which I did not do on prior projects, but now I really get it. So
that's going to be a soundbite. Everyone hear that? That's what you're supposed to do. Were you guys nervous though about buying 4 properties in one small zone where, again, it sounds like there wasn't anything at this level here before? Like on paper, that sounds like a massive risk, right? Like usually I'm not a developer, but I feel like you go to an area, you find out where the nice houses are, you buy a property, you develop it not to be the nicest, but kind of at the upper end because there's already proven sales in that area. And that's the safe route. And that's what probably I would guess the majority of developers do. It sounds like you guys did kind of like the opposite of that, or you took much bigger risks.
Look, I think to do anything, it's called spec development, speculative development. And I think we had a sense enough through our experience in the industry of what criteria people were looking for in their dream home. Right? Really what we're building, because each one's a different size, is our dream homes, right? And it doesn't make any sense on paper what we've done on any of these projects, right? To spend this amount of money per foot to build this big in this area. But we did acquire the properties for a fraction of the price were it to have been in Truesdale, the Bird Streets, Bel Air. Right? So we were able to go further with the construction cost per foot because of that. And, you know, I just feel the safety in the acquisition prices that we were able to do. But it still didn't translate. But I always felt like, look, it's a supply and demand. There are only so many houses built with an end user spec level that are on downtown to the ocean, private promontory views.
Yeah.
Right? So that is the iconic modern LA experience, right? The Stall House, the Sheets Goldstein experience. That's not even a house, that's an experience. Yeah. Right? And, I think that was really what pushed us, but there's still naysayers that want to be, in Beverly Hills proper. Mm-hmm. And I understand that. Look, Beverly Hills proper is incredible. You have the security and services from Beverly Hills, which is run in such a remarkable way. But you have this area that it's 5 to 10 minutes less up the hill than Sunset Plaza, Doheny, Bel Air Gates. Mm-hmm. So yes, we're 5 to 10 minutes further past it, but you're closer down the hill and so much easier to get to. So all these dynamics plus the affordability of acquiring the properties was why we took the chances. And also, again, wanted to be in our own silo and doing it in our own area, not in the same competition with the other projects
that makes sense. It is remarkable when we were driving up here that we had been here before when the house was under construction. Obviously, that you were here with us. And my memory of the journey of getting to the house was like much more elongated than it actually was. Driving here today was very, very convenient. But when you arrive, it feels like you're a lot higher up than the drive feels like, if that makes sense.
It is really deceptive or kind of a confusing aspect to the explosive view that you get when these 14-foot tall gates, they look like the Temple of Doom open up. I mean, because it really is such a short travel up the hill. It's great. Yeah. You don't think you would be up so high. Yeah. But really you're sitting right on top of all the palm trees, and it just, the elevation, I don't know. It's an interesting dynamic, and that's why this street is so special to us, and hopefully, others feel the same way.
I'm sure they will.
So far, the response on the house has been really incredible from press, peers in the industry. I was actually doing a punch list walk with the architects during an open house, so they didn't know it was my house. And all these people are like talking about how remarkable it is. I'm standing at the outside gate, and people are coming in. These people leaving say, "You're in for a treat." I'm like, that's cool. Yeah. That felt really good that people that, you can lie to my face if you know that it's my project, right?
Sure.
But you're not just going to lie to someone that's a stranger on the street. So I think it is pretty undeniably a cool house. It's very specific with the materiality that we utilized here. But I think that's a good thing because we don't want to, I think that the reason, and if you go to Stanley 1 today, which was done in the same philosophy as this one, where every single book on the shelves, right? Every piece of furniture, every linen was picked out. You go to that house today, 5 years later, and there's 2 new pieces of art, and most of the rest of it is almost identical. And it's because we tried to curate something that was so completed, right, and has personality. And even though that person didn't pick it, when you visit him, it does feel like it's his. And I feel like anyone that acquires this property, it will immediately feel as though it's their personality too. And so you're buying not just a home, but a lifestyle with the home. I think that I'd also love to pick out a car collection for the person, have Rainey get the wardrobe. I mean, 100%. I think it'd be so cool.
Yeah, that's an interesting
have
idea.
The full, and plus, this probably, it's probably not their only house, right?
Yeah.
Maybe it is in terms of being in LA, mostly an LA resident, but it could be someone that's fifth house, right? If you could actually curate everything, that'd be pretty cool.
It's actually something that I was a little bit confused today because the house is so well decorated and put together that I felt like I was entering somebody's home. I was like,
a very specific person.
I thought maybe you moved in. I was like, like somebody living here. Like it feels like somebody collected every single piece and has been curating it over time, and you can feel the different mix of styles. There is a sensation of travel and destinations around the world and different eras in time in terms of design. Like it's not the typical house you go to for an open house where everything is staged, everybody goes to the same stager, they use the same accessories, the same palettes. Right. It's very neutral, to say even sometimes vanilla, honestly. This one it's not shy, it has personality, it's talking to you. It's a house that's alive for me, so it's very interesting. It's very different, and I could see where the kind of interest to some of those more like mid-century retro types of architecture comes into play, because I feel like those houses back then and even now, if you go see an old mid-century house, even if it's kind of like dilapidated in a way, it's still very inviting, very cozy, very homey. It's a house that's talking to people that has character. And I feel like you guys did really good with this one because it feels that way too,
So I think the key element to a property in a house that moves you, or even any type of architecture or art, even soul, right? Soul is the key embodiment of that. And it's like what you're talking about, being alive. And I think there's a couple of elements, and I've started to kind of list what those are, of what makes the property feel like it has soul. And I think it all starts with the really raw, organic, tactile materials. You want to touch things in this house, right? Yeah. You have that slate wall that's hand cut with each one of those pieces. You want to feel what that's like. You have this titanium travertine floor that kind of the veins go all the way up and through this very long spine of the home. You have the green jade onyx, which is just, it's so brilliant, and it's repeated on the exterior of the house, the interior of the house. And so it's those tactile materials that are warm and inviting. And then I think that bringing a lot of vintage pieces, right? Whether that be furniture, our 2 chandeliers on the main level are Italian Murano glass from the 70s. And then right behind us, this is Adrian Persall art piece that's actually a bar. Well, after this, you have
to give us a demonstration of the bar. And
then, so it's bringing in vintage things that actually have that life. Yeah. That they've been there. It's like what you said when you go into a mid-century house. And I live in a great mid-century myself, and I wouldn't trade my home for any, because I love that feeling, right? And it's also, the final thing is the landscape and the fire, right? These are the nature elements, right? So we have landscape inside the home. We have landscape that comes inside the home. We spent over $500,000 on landscape on this property as a spec house, and that was with like really good deal from someone we knew that could help us out with it. But we brought in super mature trees all over the property. You saw that massive bonsai. Yeah. And that thing it's a really incredible piece. We have tropical plants everywhere hanging over all of the walls and ceilings off of the 2 wings of the house. And then 17 fire features. And that's not even including the little candles.
Not including the candles.
Yeah. So there's 17 fire features. So, you talked about it, especially at night. And now when we finish the pod in whatever time it's going to be, it'll be dark. And you'll see the house it feels like it's breathing, right? Because you have the fire that's moving the light. And we keep these dim lights so that you have that moodiness feeling, right? So you're getting all of these sensory things of the touch, the vision, the nature, right? And I think all those things together make a house feel comfortable, which at the end of the day, it is a home, right? You want to live in it. I mean, there is a place for minimalist architecture, and I do appreciate that. I just think that what we tried to achieve in this house and some of the others is that soul personality, so that it is a unique and independent, standalone piece that isn't replicable, right? So many people talk about the replication of spec houses, right? The McMansion, right? we're trying to definitely be a very,
the opposite.
Michelin level curated dining experience here.
Yeah, I think you're not trying to appeal to everybody. You're trying to appeal to that one or two people who are basically looking for a house like this, which in a way it's kind of a huge gamble, right? Like how long, it could take, I don't know how long to find that specific person who would be interested in that house. But at the same time, it's like once you found the match,
I also think though,
it's a big deal.
Like we were saying earlier, the person who buys this house, may or may not have other properties. I'm sure they have other properties. So I think it's very interesting from an architect's or designer's perspective, like the idea to buy a house, live in it, and kind of become the character of that house. Like that house allows you to live a certain way and feel a certain way and be a certain way when you're part of that house. And maybe when you go to your other property, it's very different and there's a different sensation.
It's like you wear the house in a way, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's like in our office, we're always talking about creating experiences. And so when we talk to clients, that's kind of the first thing we tell them, like, we don't really think of ourselves as architects or designers of buildings. We create experiences. And for some people, they're like, what does that mean? But I think that really is the essence of a house in particular, because that is what you're creating. And I think the challenge with a lot of properties that are, done by developers is they don't have that soul that you're describing. It's something that is easily sellable, and therefore it doesn't feel like anything, and it doesn't create that experience. I mean, they're nice houses. A lot of them are nice houses. But this one creates a very specific experience, which, if this is your primary residence or not, I think would be a lot of fun to partake in that,
From a business perspective, on paper, it's not your most conventional thing, but I'm able to take more risk than your typical developer who's a full-time developer, because, I'm only doing one of these at a time in terms of construction, right? So I have the company that's running Crest, and this is like a side project. And I'm also not relying on this financially, right? Crest is there. It is a consulting firm, and therefore it is a company that, has cash flow allowances for me to be more exploratory and artistic in this field of my, entrepreneurial career. And so I think it's allowed me to not have the stress that maybe many developers experience of trying to target something that's very scientific.
Yeah.
And we're able to take much more of a creative approach here because I'm not under the same level of pressure that a full-time developer relying on finishing that house and selling that house immediately has. So what I want, because I love Los Angeles and I love architecture, and, people know me for what I do in the other field. If I was going to go and do this, and I think the Williams felt the same, and my brother as well, who's been my partner on some of the other projects, we might as well try and create something that's iconic and will have a lasting legacy to add on to what we built in our primary experience, our primary jobs, right? And primary companies we built. And so those components allowed us, plus the, I guess, risk taker mindset, really, that we do have. At the end of the day, it is, something you have to get comfortable with. But, one of my favorite quotes is actually from Elon Musk's father. Elon Musk's father is a big adventurer, very fast. His parents are very fascinating. His whole childhood, everything's really interesting about that guy. And his father was an adventurer, said something that really resonates with me in business and also personal life. Live life dangerously, carefully, right? So taking, calculated risks. Like a lot of the, extracurricular activities that I do are pretty extreme, but there's also a, racing or skiing or any of those things. You do have some level of control, and you don't do things that are completely stupid. Right. So here we felt like we were doing something that was a bit outside of comfort level. Right. But it had the view, it has the design, it had the vision, and then we executed, so you're living life dangerously carefully, right? And that's how you do things that really move you and drive you. And that's what gets me going every day.
It makes a lot of sense. And I also, with the people who did it, all of you are very experienced with Los Angeles. So I feel like there's also a kind of like meta information that comes with that experience that sort of, it seeps into all the decisions you make, maybe even subconsciously. It's not like you were an out-of-towner, like, oh, let's try this crazy experiment.
Right.
You knew what was up with Los Angeles. Talking about the process. So you acquired the property 7 years ago, you said. And with the idea that it was going to be developed or for just to acquire it? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
With the idea it was going to be developed, but in anticipation of the success we were hoping to have on the first one, right? So we were making an investment in the neighborhood, knowing we were making the biggest investment in the neighborhood. And hopefully that would translate to increased value for this one. So it was very calculated in terms of timing and philosophy of make sure that house is so undeniable, because that's now already sold. So I have to be less apologetic for this one because that one sold for $3,300 a foot.
Yeah.
$3,300 a foot, right? And so it proved concept. We still have to prove concept again.
Sure.
I never believe anything's ever going to happen until it happens, right? And then even when it happens, I'm still kind of skeptical. But,
but it happened.
Just me. Yeah, I'm bad at celebrating. But it's like on to the next.
On to the next.
You get disappointed a couple of times and then you just kind of like...
Yeah, but it was strategic in that way to try and, honestly, my future goal, I would love to do something like that on a commercial multifamily level, right? Where you're building something in an area that you believe in. And if you invest the infrastructure, right? This was infrastructure in creating a beautiful home, right? But really in the future, I'd love to do things that aren't just for one person, but for many, right? And really collaborate. For something that scale, you got to collaborate with your existing clients and big time people for those things. But it would be a great vision for the future. And it is about trying to set infrastructure for an area, because I think that's where probably the most successful investors and developers, in many different industries have, it's identifying these calculated risk tolerances and then doing something that you go all the way with. Yeah. Right.
So when you say infrastructure, that's an interesting word, an interesting way to describe it. Do you mean that is wrapped within that idea the fact that you're almost the first one in a certain area, and therefore the first one is proof of concept, and the more you do is what is establishing that infrastructure?
Yeah, exactly. You got to lay the groundwork with one, right? And fortunately, it worked. It worked, right?
So when this property was acquired, was Stanley 1 completed with construction and sold, or what was the timing like?
I'm trying to think if we broke ground before. I think it was after we had sold.
Okay.
It was after we had sold. We broke ground on this. That's correct.
Gotcha.
It was.
So when you acquired, take us through the timeline from like once you acquired the property to then, establishing the team, going through design, the whole thing.
Well, and also choosing to do a different vision from the first one rather than doing what most developers do, meaning like we find an aesthetic or vocabulary and just kind of carry it on for every project and keep the same team on every project, which you guys chose not to do that with this one.
With any of them.
With any of them.
The only repeat architect I've used on development is Sayota. They've done 2 of them that we had, but neither of them got built. Well, actually, one got built, but I didn't build it. It was the person that acquired it from me. But I mean, the list, it's so funny because Crest is all about making things easier and more efficient, right? The entire company is based on
That's an interesting observation.
I didn't think about that until now.
Yeah.
Right? The whole company is based on efficiencies, speed, and, making sure you are able to take every efficient path possible.
Yeah.
So maybe this is my my area to, I don't know, express creativity. I don't even know how to describe it.
Yeah.
Because that is funny that, it is so much the antithesis of our formula for the primary firm. But I think here's where it comes from now that I think about it, because I haven't really thought about this philosophically. But it's we've worked with so many talented people, right? And that's not just the architects, but it's the builders. We've had different builders do things, the different clients. We're working with some of the most brilliant people in the world on these projects, right? And, you're seeing all these different things. So I guess, at least for myself, I feel like I've seen so much greatness in the talents that we've worked with. I kind of wanted to feel it myself, right? Because in all of our projects where we're the consultant, I'm never, I give guidance, and our clients, at this point in our careers, like really take that guidance heavily and with a lot of importance, but I'm never the official final decision maker, right? However, in these developments, I am able to be the final decision maker. Obviously, if I have a partner on a project, then that's a component of it. But at the end of the day, it's crossing my desk to make those decisions. So working with these architects and interior designers has been a process that I've, always wanted to experience with them. Yeah. And each of these homes, I'm building it like it is my personal residence, right? I care about it that much, and I would want to live in any one of these homes, except that I like my original mid-century because I feel like that'll always be cool, and I may always want the next thing on a development.
As long as you're invited on those development properties every Friday, then you're good.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. But I think that, in just going down the list of some of these architects, we said Scott Mitchell, right? We said Austin Kelly, X10, Vantage, Sayota, Ignacio Rodriguez did a project with us, and
they all these guys on the show.
Chad Oppenheim, Tim Campbell. I mean, these are like great people. I really want to do a project with Paul McLean. His latest works, I mean, Paul and I are so close. His latest works are so mind blowing. You guys are going to absolutely love his next series that's coming out right now.
Yeah,
because it's a lot of end user projects, and they're at such a high level. I mean, you saw it with the one Michael Rubin bought. Is just such a beautiful home.
Also, another really nice person.
Oh, he's super sweet.
Yeah,
he's
Paul?
so kind.
Oh my gosh, yes, of course.
It's like, well, it's an interesting thing because, not to go on a tangent, but from an outsider's perspective, when you see these very high level houses that are very expensive and exquisite, one kind of assumes, and partially because of the history of famous architects, that the architect of that house might be kind of a dick. But then you meet them, in a lot of cases, all the people that you mentioned that we've met, they're the nicest people, the most down to earth, and they're just interested in creating beautiful things that are good for people. And that's just about it.
I do want to throw in so Plus Development.
Oh, yeah.
Also did one of our projects. I don't want to leave anyone out. And they are, that company and Crest, we have so much synergy between us. We love working together. Today is my last day clean shaven for the month. Crest and Plus do Movember, so I'll be growing out the mustache.
It's a good thing we timed the podcast.
Yeah. I think that actually our first pod was in November. I was very self-conscious that I had a little bit of a stash going.
Oh, that's right. It was. Yeah.
So in any case, they did it, and I'd love to work with some of the European designers out there. I'd love to do something with Joseph Durand. I think he is just mind-blowingly talented, right? If you could get, Chris, my brother's doing his personal house with Woods Dangarin. Woods Dangarin is so brilliant. Yeah. They're really the masters at this, throwback to mid-century design. And again, the nicest people, right? And, I think that you talk about this, each one of those people we've talked about are such great characters or the company as itself. Seota is not just one person, it's many, but the cultures of these companies are really interesting. And I've always felt like there's two predominant industries in Los Angeles, right? That I deal with, which is entertainment and construction, architecture. And the entertainment industry, which has a lot of similarities, honestly.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, really, look, what we're doing, I'm a producer on my development projects. I don't draw it. I just have a vision. I bring all these teams together. It's a producer, right? The architect, the engineers, all these different things come into play. And obviously in the LA architecture and development world, you're going to be dealing with people in the entertainment industry. They're owners of these homes. And some are independently really great people. But in that industry itself, I do find like there's a lot of negativity, right? And a lot of, people it's almost like a famine mentality, right? There's not enough to eat for everybody. But in our industry, at least over the last decade and a half, there's so much work. Like everybody's really happy for each other. And I think that creates a culture where you're able to be nice, right? Because, someone's going to recommend you on another project, even if it's an architect to architect. Like there's very little cattiness and negativity talked about. There's maybe a couple things that people have disagreements philosophically. And, if a quality line is cut because of a developer client, typically, other architects can say things about that. But I think we have a really positive industry. And that's something that I think helps with working so much, is that the people you work with, you feel your friends, right? Especially I'm probably the poster child for that, right? Like my brother is my business partner. My best friend who's a lawyer is our GM. His wife is our CFO. Steven's best friend works in the company. Brandon and Rainey, I'm, godfather to their son, Gianni, who's just an absolute stud. And, I've done in like people like Paul are like some of my best friends, Chad, Scott, like these are people that I really deeply have this connection with. And it's cool to want to deliver for people you also care about, right? It's not an industry where there's no face to the client. The client is everything, right? And in delivering for that client feels super gratifying, I think, because whether it be the architect for us is a lot of time our client, or the actual money behind something, the end user. I think there's a lot of positivity when you're in an industry that builds things, right? Because you're going from nothing to creating something that's tangible, right? And I think that's a cool component also when you think about what it is that we all do, is you have ideas that are built. And that is not an easy thing to do. And think about how many stages, how many people, how much time goes into creating things. And I think as humans, right, this is what we do, right? This is what separates us besides a nest or a beaver dam, which are actually pretty cool. I'm sure they're like, I finished my nest. This is great. I'm going to raise my family here, right? It feels, and that's, I think, something in nature, right? To finish things and create something, it feels very like
almost
natural,
primal.
right? It's something that we're put on this planet to do.
It's very nice to hear you say that, because I would say that a lot of the architecture profession, again, historically, has been very brutal to itself.
Oh, yeah.
Very competitive.
Almost destructive in a way.
Yeah, competitive in a negative way. And we've seen that change. I think it's changed drastically in the last 10, 15 years. And I think also through the show, because we get the opportunity to speak with a lot of different professional architects and non-architects, that it seems to be across the board, in California, but across the United States and across the world, more and more positivity into the profession of architecture and all the AEC industries, professions. And, why that change is taking place now, I have some speculations, but it's a great thing, because I firmly agree with what you said about what we're doing and the value of it and the importance of it and the necessity of it. And also, like you said, it's hard to do, and
it's already hard to do. You don't need to add that other, human conflict and kind of like, I don't know, tension on top of trying to realize this very difficult exercise to begin with. Like, it's not bringing anything to that energy.
Yeah, when we have good energy and good people, it makes everything go smoother. Obviously, everyone works harder, and I think it actually it bleeds into the final product. Yeah. I think it for sure does, especially when, again, like you're describing, these projects take a really long time. So that kind of energy you're feeling and camaraderie, when it's there over the course of 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, it makes a really big difference. And I think that's maybe one aspect of projects that clients who have, or anyone who's never done a project before, they underestimate that aspect of it. Of having, I guess essentially what I'm saying is having a team that works well together, because if you don't have that, it's an uphill battle. It's already an uphill battle. That's even more so when that friction is there or that synergy is not there.
And I'm kind of curious to learn about your experience being on that other side of a project, being more on the client decision-making side rather than the consulting side. And what was the things that maybe were the most surprising that you didn't anticipate, or the things that maybe were, the hardest to deal with, or the most exciting to deal with, the big highlights, good and bad, of being on that side of the project?
I think on that note, before I start thinking about how it is dealing with all the clients, can I make you guys a drink?
Yeah, sure. You want to show the thing.
So this is an Adrian Persall artist piece from the early 70s, late 60s. So this actually opens, and we've got our alcohol in store here.
So what you get in there?
You said a little tequila.
All right, here we go.
So I'll go ahead and bring this over here.
Now things are getting warmed up.
This is a really cool piece.
I think it's very cool, yeah. I mean,
should I close it back up?
I'm going to put this together first.
Okay.
Our ice melted too much, guys. So. Don't drink the whole thing.
Yeah, this is not a shot.
No.
Thank you.
This is the first time we're drinking on camera.
Oh, no, it's not the... Oh, yeah, no, it is the first time on camera. Yeah, we've done it off camera here. Cheers.
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 To your great success. I mean, Second Studio has been a real thriving experience and helpful for the architectural community. So
we've been very fortunate, yeah.
I'm so proud of where
much.
you've come and the people who you have interviewed at this point. It's a Starchitect list. I'm honored to be able to come on here not as an architect. I mean, it really is it's really a great appreciation I have for what you've done. And I think that I bet there's such an impact you've had on getting younger people that aren't even in college yet.
Yeah.
I have this idea that I feel like young people are in their rooms listening to your podcast with some of these architects and maybe didn't think about architecture as truly their path, but the way these architects speak about their projects is very inspirational. And I think that there is not enough about the industry really out there in terms of the profession. A lot of what's seen is the glitz and glamour of $1 Million Listing, the Oppenheim show, not Chad, the other Oppenheims, right? And they're great guys. I love all these people, the men and women that are part of these shows, but real estate today is mainly shown as glitz and glamour, right? Not as much of the technical aspect to it. Whereas I think there is a place for it. And I think you're really one of the cutting edge people that's out there showing it and really diving deeper into what it means to be in this field that creates some of these cool glitz and glamour houses. But so again, thank you so much and congratulations on your success. And we've actually brought you guys a couple projects that have started to work out. So, we're trying to bring as much around as possible. And you're a really up and coming firm. So congratulations on that. Your talents, I think, are similar to what my experiences are. Just being around these people helps you become so much better, right? So you're really smart for taking this approach of, all right, we're a starting architecture firm. Why don't I talk to the greatest architects in the world for 2 hours and pick their brains? It's just brilliant. So, again, applaud that effort. It's really creative and been a success.
That's very kind of you to say. And we're more than happy to have you on the show, obviously. And the podcast has really just been a blessing. We're super fortunate to be able to have on these types of guests and have these conversations. And you're right. We've certainly learned a lot individually. And you were talking about high school students. It's a funny thing. We get DM'd from high school students pretty often. And when it started happening maybe about 3 years ago, it kind of freaks me out because, a high school kid or sometimes younger, they're like 14 years old. And to think that we provide some insights to the profession as you described it, which has always been our goal. So it's very flattering to hear that it's being received that way. We're just lucky, and we're obviously going to keep doing it. And it's...
Well, and there's so much great talent out there. I mean, like you mentioned it with the work that you do and what you see, that it feels to us that, well, we could just talk about what we do, but what's good with that? We should talk about all the good stuff that everybody is doing within our profession. And I think kind of embracing the camaraderie between offices and being able to speak highly of another office who does the same thing that we do and we're as interested as they are in what we do is just showing that that's kind of how we should all be functioning,
Well, once you both have completed enough projects, maybe I come back on and you guys can celebrate what you have done, and we get a podcast.
And you interview us.
Yes, that would be great. I would love that.
That sounds good.
Sounds good.
So, we'll see how soon down the line that can be. Hopefully
soon.
Do a development someday.
Hopefully soon, yeah.
Yeah. So, the last thing you had talked about was the differential on client interface versus being the client yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that something important in many aspects of life is empathy and putting yourself in the shoes of others, right? I've always felt like the golden rule is the key component to life, right? You make mistakes, of course, but at the end of the day, if you try and do what you would like for others to treat you the same way, I think that's a real key for success in life. And what this has done has really allowed me to understand from my client's perspective, because as the developer and as the client, I hire Crest, I hire the architect, and now I'm understanding like, hey, why is this not done yet? Or why didn't I know about this issue, right? Why is this bill so high? All of these things. Why wasn't something caught? It's a lot of why, right, as a client. And to be able to see the failures that occur on every project. And look, there's never going to be a perfect project that has no obstacles. I don't think it's possible. I mean, even from our consulting company, we've had, we could count on our hands the amount of times we've had no plan check corrections on a submittal set, which is crazy because we review it pre-plan check. Like that's our job. Yeah. And, we've done almost 10,000 projects, insane, right? Over the last nearly, 15, 20 years. And still can just count on a hand how many times you've only received a couple corrections. Take plan check and turn it into a construction with all the over years, you're not going to be able to have a project that doesn't have its complications. And I think that, it's provided these extra layers of empathy, but also it's helped me identify where these things occur. Because the best way to be able to solve a mistake is to have experienced it in the past, right? You want to be able to see how things don't work to be able to make them work. That's really been a life philosophy and learning lesson for me in so many things, right? So this mantra I have of relentless positivity, it comes from when a negative item occurs, which I don't even always see as negative, but an obstacle occurs, it's what is the solution? And then the next time that happens, now you're going to be prepared. So a bad thing is not actually always a bad thing. It really, if you look at it grand scheme and looking towards the future, it's a benefit because now you're in a place where you have the experience and you have the ability to have the foresight of something that has gone wrong before. And, over and over and over again, when you repeat the process, you can fine tune it in certain ways. So maybe one day this development company will actually be fairly streamlined, which I do think it will be actually. I'm really excited to build the next one because I've seen the most important things of success on a project. Maybe I'll dive into that. Mm-hmm. So, and again, I keep on leading back to how important this has been as an experience for my brother and I to make Crest an even better company, right? Where we are now able to guide on so many more different levels to ensure success of projects. And our philosophy is the more projects that are successful, the more longevity our industry has, right? The people over the last couple of years have really struggled in construction because prices have skyrocketed. COVID made tons of delays, the ability to obtain products, the supply chain issues that were because of COVID. It was really tough, and I think we've learned and we're trying to express as much as possible is the more you can build a home on paper and complete it. And with what we can do now with 3D renderings, VR, which I still think, I don't understand why it hasn't gotten to an even better level. VR came out in architecture, I want to say 6 or 7 years ago, where you could start walking through a house.
Yeah.
It's not that much different than where it was 6 or 7 years ago. The renderings have gotten a lot better.
Yeah.
But I really feel like if you could feel and sense the home and build it in 3D, now with these Rhino systems that architects are taking all of the structural and the MEPs and now building the house fully integrated with all these things aligned, the cabinetry integrated and all these things. I mean, if you can do it that way, you're going to have a project that can finally fly. My new saying to clients and for myself on the future projects is let the builder build, right? Get them a set of plans that you can go into the field and actually construct, right? And the best way to get a negativity roller coaster and really a downhill spiral on a project is to provide change orders to your contractor, right?
Yeah.
Because in negotiating a project, the only time you are personally in a position of power when you're the builder or client, whatever it may be, is at the front end when you are negotiating with 3 different subs, right? Because it's actually the general contractor is not the one physically building your house. The general contractor is
It's the producer.
They are the man. They're the director.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's who's like, but the actors have to do their role. But once you've hired that actor, right? If that actor doesn't want to do something now, you're really stuck.
Yeah.
But when you have multiple subs and you're negotiating with them at the front end, you have negotiating power with them, especially in today's market where there is now going to trend towards, a necessity for people to maintain their workforce and want projects. You're going to have a lot of negotiating power. But once someone's on the job and they submit a change order, well, they're not negotiating against anyone else. They can really charge whatever. Yeah. And if you don't agree quickly, it's going to delay your project, which is going to cost money.
Yeah.
So the philosophy of patience and discipline is what I've kind of been preaching, which is patience of designing your home all the way down to the furniture. I mean, that's how serious I am because I want to be able to pick out where the lighting goes. And I want to know my amount of fixtures before I start the project, right? I want to know where the plugs are going to go. I want no change orders. Ideally, obviously you're going to have something.
Yeah.
But the more patience you can have at the front end, working with your architect, interior designer, structural engineer, MEP consultants, and the general contractor.
Yes.
Right? Helping you value engineer and build this thing on paper when it costs you the least amount of money. Right? But you have the time patience you need to have. But I feel without question, you will make up for all of that in multiples in terms of time and clearly in terms of cost savings if you can do these negotiations up front and have a disciplined set of plans that you then take into the field and execute with what I just said, discipline, right? Patience to get it ready, and then discipline to not make changes when you're out there, right? Because you're never going to be perfect with what you did, but the sacrifice of making changes in the field is not worth it to me. So I am very hopeful that clients who I've been speaking with about this, who are doing their own projects, and myself for the future projects, are going to be able to hopefully, embody this philosophy of, the front end and then the discipline of not making changes during construction because you did the work up front, because of all these visual things we have nowadays to be able to, truly see and feel the home. And I'd love to hear, more from the industry, how can we get even better at producing the visuals for clients to be able to walk through something before it gets built to make sure it's exactly what they want?
Those are all really, really good points. And I'm kind of stoked to hear you say that, because one of the things that we're always trying to convey strongly to clients, especially if they've not gone through a project before, is that to spend the time specifically during construction documents, which are different from permit drawings, and a lot of people don't know that, to allow your architect to spend the time on CDs, construction documents, to do a very thorough set. Hyper thorough. Because the thing we always tell clients is we say, look, construction documentation serves a couple purposes. One is that essentially we're solving building problems before they ever happen. And it's therefore also way cheaper and much faster to solve them on paper than in real life with real materials and construction. The thing with construction documentation that's tricky, though, is that for a lot of people, clients, they get impatient during that phase for a number of reasons. I think one, they're less involved during CDs. Like during the early design phases, we're meeting with the client like once a week, maybe, like very often. It's very exciting and things are taking place. A lot of construction documentation for architects is just hyper technical, and the office just needs time to produce and to think through all these details, which are very important, but don't necessarily require us to meet with the client every week to show something new and fancy and interesting. And so, I'll hear what you have to say, but I think because of that, for a lot of clients, they don't have that patience, and they're like, well, I think we're good, so we can just start. And for us, that's where we know where problems come from when that proper amount of time is not given. We've taken over projects from other architects in the past when that didn't take place. Clients are in construction and they're nervous about what's happening, and somehow they find us and have a phone call and we say, well, let me see your construction documents. We look at them. This is a permit set at best, like a very lightweight permit set, and you're breaking ground and you're starting framing. This is why you have problems, because you didn't have the CDs. And also, by the way, therefore, you also don't know the price of the house, because the contractor, he can't price it accurately with all of their subs without knowing precisely what goes in the house. So,
and a lot of these projects too, they've only been looking at the project in plans and at best exterior elevation, but not 3D. They haven't gone through the materials. They don't even know what the interiors look like yet, which to us is like
no furniture layouts either.
No furniture layout. To us, it's like you can't design a house without thinking about the whole house all the time, constantly. Of course, you're not going to start developing the details right then. It's going to take time to lead to those details, but you got to sculpt the vision as you move through the project. And the vision is not just the exterior walls. It's not just one piece. It's everything, right? How does everything come together? So the construction document is a tricky phase, but I feel like as a creative office, it's kind of like we have to strategize and make sure the client feels like they're still involved. We're still communicating to them what we're doing. We're showing them some details. Maybe that's when we start talking about furniture, custom furniture, and keep their mind busy and they feel like we're moving forward and we're moving forward and they stay excited. It's kind of, the construction document is super exciting for us because we get super technical. Like we really carve the details of every single item in a space, which, if you love design, that's where like all the small moves actually make a difference. But for a client, they see those drawings and they don't know what that means. They're like shop drawings level of millwork, and they're like, that's cool. I have no idea what that's going to look like. And fair to them, they're not supposed to. They're only supposed to understand the final result. They're not supposed to understand how things are put together and how it's made, right? That's not necessary. But I think like it's, again, that tactile approach, that sensitive approach to what the project is going to be. Like, they've got to feel like the vision is moving forward and the project keeps moving forward.
That's a lot of where energy goes to, is trying to understand the client's headspace and where they are. And you said keep them entertained, which is a funny way of putting it, but keeping them engaged in the project. Because otherwise, like who would want to sit through 6 months of CDs and pay an architect a bunch of money when you don't know what they're doing, really? It's a tough sell to make. So I think it's better to strategize to do what you said.
Yeah.
Well, we're on a crusade to help the architecture and construction industry stay successful, stay in this positive mindset, like we said. Even though the architects and everyone in the industry is cool, but there's a lot of animosity between clients and their project teams because of what happens in the field when you're not prepared to go to construction, right? So it is really on top of our mind these days. And again, I will reiterate, this process of being developer, right, and helping and doing it myself has just changed everything for our mindset in getting our clients permits. We, at every opportunity we can, are trying to encourage the entire team to work towards successful construction, not just starting construction, right? And I think that's the big change that you've seen from us as we become more mature, experienced in our firm, right? We're continuing to offer these extra layers of, wisdom, really, right? And that's been really a blessing for us. And, not everyone's going to listen, but if we can get the message out, and people seem to trust what we have to say quite often. So I think it's getting out there, and it used to probably be easier to get away with because costs have gotten to such an extraordinary point now. And you're not talking, little dollars of change. We're talking hundreds of thousands at the low end on these things. But a lot of times we're talking millions of dollars. And that moves the needle, right? Whereas maybe before, when there was less cost differential and there was less demand in the market, you were able to make changes in the field, and it didn't really shift the narrative of what you were doing. Now, it's everything. And I think a lot of these subs, look, it's just what I've seen and what I've heard and experienced. I do think they're really going after these change orders, is that's where they're making their profit. And it's because they have to be so competitive at the front end. This is where they get their bite at the apple, right? And that's terrible, unfortunately. But it's also a reason why I'm super anti-cost plus from the construction industry. I don't know how this has been the status quo for so many decades. As I've really come into a lot of this part of the world as an outsider, right? Not traditionally educated in these fields, came in, but now I have more experience than most architects and builders, right? And seeing some of the things I find to be just flawed in their philosophy, the biggest of which is cost plus. Cost plus, for anyone that doesn't know, is a contractor's fee, typically around 10% of the project cost. But if the project goes up in cost, the contractor makes more money, right? So, and if the project cost goes down, the contractor makes less money. Okay. So look, you hire a contractor because you have trust with them. But at the end of the day, if you were just AI, computer algorithm, you're going to try and make it more money so that you get more fee, right? And especially now, these fees go up so much. So there's no fight back from the contractor, which remember is not the actual person building it, but the person negotiating and hiring the person on these change orders, right? So we're also only signing up projects and also encouraging clients to sign up projects with contractors where you're coming up with a fixed fee contract based on, look, we think the project's going to fall between this number and this number, some level of range. And if it goes here, you're going to make the same amount. And if it goes here, make the same amount. If it goes over, we changed something. Like we all agree that something changed and therefore we need to make a delta payment to make up for that. But I think taking cost plus out of the construction industry, and I hope I'm not offending contractors, but I would imagine that most of them feel the same way, that they don't want to feel like they are, taking advantage of their clients, because in our city, it's all about repeat business. And there's very little advertisement for architects, contractors, us. It's all word of mouth, right? So you get that from good reputation. And I think you can get a better reputation by, look, we are 100% on your team, that we're going to try and save at every angle we can. And so a fixed fee contract based on a really good set of plans, because it's the only way you can do it. You can't do a fixed fee if you don't have a good set of plans, is something that's going to benefit the industry as a whole. And so, again, one of these other things that we're really trying to push forward as a new philosophy, because just because something's been a certain way for a long time, that doesn't mean that it needs to stay that way. And there's a young generation of, project managers out there, the Park Lanes, the Pluses, those guys that are, pushing for owner backing and like making sure that they're taking care of their owners. There's great young architecture firms out there. There's even young builders out there. And I think this new generation is open to changing the philosophies a bit and wants to have this continuing, we want to do this for decades to come, right? And it's important to do it for decades to come for the industry to be working in a very, symbiotic, everybody working together with synergies, right?
And now a little break for our show sponsors. We are supported by Enscape. Enscape is a fast and easy-to-use real-time visualization and VR tool for the AEC industry. Enscape is not a standalone application. Instead, it's a plugin, which makes things much easier. It plugs into Revit, SketchUp, Rhino, ArchiCAD, and Vectorworks. With Enscape, you can create realistic renderings, 360-degree panoramas, and videos, and you can even immerse clients in VR to give them a deeper understanding of their building. Enscape is used by more than 500,000 monthly users worldwide from over 150 countries. So if you want a fast and user-friendly real-time visualization experience, then click on the Enscape 3D link in our show notes.
The Second Studio podcast is made possible by support from Autodesk.
Autodesk has been part of the design conversation since 1982, providing the tools that help architects around the globe imagine and create beautifully designed, memorable buildings that people love and admire. Autodesk supports the work of the Second Studio, bringing the architecture community together, sparking curiosity, and leading vibrant interviews with the industry's visionaries and thought leaders.
The Second Studio works hard to carry the architecture conversation forward, and Autodesk is proud to contribute to this podcast. If you want to learn more about Autodesk, click the link in the episode notes.
It's tough. I think there's always this inherent problem. I mean, you just said it with the cost plus or a fee that's based on a percentage of construction costs of why would anyone whose fee is based on that care to keep the construction cost in control? I think the fear that contractors have who are proponents for cost plus is when the project changes, they want to know that they're covered, right? But in my view, if the project changes like that much, like the scope increases or dramatically decreases, when that happens, then that's a different conversation. Then a conversation has to be had anyway about what's going to take place in the future, because now the game has changed, the plan has changed.
Well, and that's where also, back in the day, the way the price of project was to wait until the construction documents were done, and then you had to set over to contractors, bid it out, get the best number, and then hire the guy.
I hate that model.
It's silly, because a designer, an architect, and a client who have been working on those drawings for months spend hours and hours thinking about this project, then hand it off to a random guy who's going to look at it, know nothing about the project, are expecting him to understand all of the technicalities and nuances and come up with a number with it, which is kind of crazy. So I think that's where, and we've seen that more and more, and that's something that we're very in favor to, is to do like the pre-construction services when the design service happens. So bring on board a contractor, even just for consulting services, basically, to help price it out, which in the end will help him price his work out and his profit, right? So if you do that early on, you can understand and manage the cost of a project much better than if you wait until the whole thing has been designed. And therefore, you can ask him maybe at this point to have more of a fixed fee. So he knows exactly what he's going to be building. He knows exactly how much profit he wants to make. Everybody's on the same page, and let's go and build it. And it's crazy to think that that was never a trend before. And it's kind of becoming more of the norm now, thankfully. But why were things done in a way that, was so kind of like bits and pieces here and there, where we're trying to put a project back together where it's never been together to start with?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about if you're a client and you're doing a house, imagine in the same way you're the owner of a company that makes phones or something, right? And you have an R&D department, and you have a department that's in charge of fabricating the phones. It would not make any sense when you're going to create this brand new phone for the very first time that you would have your R&D department do all this research and design for a year and have them not have any conversation with the fabrication people. Like, you wouldn't do that, right? That makes no sense. And yet historically in construction and in architecture, that has been the way. And to Marina's point, it just doesn't make any sense. I think it's a prime example of what you said, of it's one of those things that it's been done this way before. This is how it works. And
and nobody ever questioned it. But
if it doesn't make sense, then we should do something differently.
I've got questions. Look, I've seen a lot of flaws in the industry, and there will continue to be flaws that we identify, and it's up to those that are going to be doing this for a long time to try and identify them, because I believe that peace creates longevity, right? And that is way easier to be done if there's not confusion in the market, right? Yeah. And when someone doesn't know what's actually happening, it creates animosity, right? Another saying I use all the time, and I come up with these things a lot, but ambiguity creates animosity. And again, most of these philosophies are not just in business. This is like life philosophies, right? Of if something's not clear in a relationship, and there's not an understanding of what the responsibilities are, or what's actually included in these drawings, or what the expectation is of someone, it creates animosity on the other side, right? So communication is really the everything, and that's verbal, that's on paper, that's on 3D drawings, that's everything up front to be able to get proper expectations from people so that you are able to achieve, this, I guess, peace or happiness or this Zen nature of something that's really difficult, but done in a way that if it's communicated properly, can be done in a positive environment, right?
Yeah, it makes total sense. I did want to answer your question or touch on the topic of the visualization of architecture and its importance for many reasons, but one is so that the client understands very clearly what they're getting, which helps avoid change orders during construction.
Contractor knows what to build.
And the contractor knows what to build, for sure. We're very strong, and always have been, and it's in part due to our generation, but very strong proponents for 3D work, working in a 3D space to design. Like, there's great value to designing in 3D and not just in plan and elevation. Which,
are you in Rhino now?
We use ArchiCAD, which is the BIM software, and we use SketchUp for our exploratory stuff because it's super fast. And we use Enscape, who's a sponsor, to render out the stuff to produce very realistic things, to test lighting and materials and things like that. Yeah. So
that's, it'd be nice if everything could be in one package, right? So you're creating your plan set and your 3D model out of the same program. Yeah. I guess would be interesting to utilize.
Yeah, that's what ArchiCAD does for us,
So
actually.
ArchiCAD is similar to, so that's the one where you can put all of the utilities into the building.
Structural,
and all that.
Mechanical, all that stuff, clash detection.
Yeah.
And so, like, from a professional standpoint, it's super important, but also it just makes sense in our minds to, when we're conveying the design of something to a client, whether it be the facade, the exterior of the building, or a room, that they would see plans and elevation, sure, but 3D views, because that is what 99.9% of people understand, and that's what it's going to be. That's what you're going to experience. And
even for us,
when are we going to wear it? So that's what I want. Look, renderings are so photorealistic, it's epic, right? But there was a period in time when a lot of architecture firms were starting to present projects with
the VR side.
Yeah.
In fact, we changed the layout of this one. I had Ignacio, actually. He's always very cutting edge on these things. And he put this house into his VR system. And it was an original design that Vantage had done. And we realized that this layout didn't work. The original layout of this house was kind of this cube that sat out with water surrounding it on three sides.
Oh, wow.
Instead of this linear system that we have now. And it was through the VR walking and kind of being like, this just doesn't feel like it'd be functional, right? There's no outdoor space to be able to go to here. So it's when we actually changed the house into what you have now, which is, really a spine house where it's like everything is aligned in this one period and everything has views to the city. Except this room, because the pool is on this side of the wall.
Yeah.
Right? But every other room has these spectacular views. And it was through the VR setup, but that was one of the last times that I used it, 5-6 years ago. And I've seen it recently, but it's just, architects were hot about it because it came out.
Yeah.
It was exciting.
Yeah.
But where is it right now in terms of its evolution? And it's interesting that it's not,
it's not as utilized, and I think as forward going as we thought, all of us thought that it would go. I think part of it is that it's probably because it's another thing that it's another tool of communication that has to be explored and understood and kind of like learned and managed in a way that works for each office in their own way of working.
Yeah, I know the answer to this because we've talked to a lot of architects on the show about this subject, actually. And there's just the dumb practicality for a lot of offices who are so busy that the idea of putting in the new technology, they're like, I'll do that later, and then years go by. But
everyone's been so busy. Right?
Say again?
Everyone's been so busy, it's hard to implement new.
Exactly. That's definitely part of it. For sure. The other thing, too, is that there is this concern that architects have who have not used VR and ones who have, very importantly, that when you strap on a headset for a client, they start to look at every single detail when maybe in that design phase, we're not at that point yet. So if we create a VR model during schematic design, and we're really talking about flow and general materiality and views and things like that, that it's difficult to convey those ideas in a VR set without like there's this feeling that when you create an environment to be in, that you have to model it out to the nth degree.
I agree.
Yeah.
But that's why I do think it should get to that level, right? Where you start plan view concept, right? 2D dimensional, right? Does this look like the right layout that you're looking for in the house? Then you're going to the, SketchUp model type of 3D spin around, right? And then you're going to photorealistic renderings that do have furniture and art and items in the space and lighting, right? Why not take that next step and let someone be in there and feel it? Because it's right there. The technology has to be there.
No, it's there. It's 100% there. It's actually not complicated.
It's so helpful to be able to, do these final touches so that we can have a construction project that avoids as many change orders as possible. Yeah. I do think that it would be really valuable to feel scale, right? Furniture, lighting, materiality, cabinet space, all these things I think could be really well understood with VR, but that's another look. If you guys aren't ready to do it, I understand.
it'll happen with Meta glasses and Apple Vision and all those things.
Another thing we've heard too is that if you are motion sick, some of the system
no, that's just a
also what's so funny. This actually brings me back. Remember when the metaverse started to get a lot of momentum?
No, what happened?
I was asked to speak on some of these panels about architecture in the metaverse.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I guess that could be kind of cool, actually. You could build all these really grand homes. And as an architect, you could also switch them up. We could go from the walnut to, travertine walls or whatever you wanted to do every time. And I think there is actually, so if the metaverse comes back, there will be more 3D houses coming out.
Yeah,
I think that would be cool.
I think also that the slow adoption of it is, to be honest, it's just because the vast majority of architecture offices, even the high-end ones, they're not producing models to that level that you're describing.
I also miss the physical models. One of my favorite architects is William Hefner. Yeah. And you go into his office, it's so epic. Okay, it's got a beautiful model of each one of his houses. Yeah. It's super cool. And to be able to feel and touch that. And also, I think as architect, be able to present that to your client afterwards would be pretty cool too. They can put it in their office or whatever.
I do miss that. And now you just press a button and the model gets printed, when before you had to cut it, actually decide what things were going on the model.
So that's how I learned how to read maps, was I would build 3D topographic maps for my mentor.
Oh, no.
Right? So with where you use the X-Acto knife and you take hundreds of layers of topo, and it was all hillside properties, right? But it was also cool because I'd also cut out where the house was going to be, so I'd do these grading exhibits. Okay. But that is why I was able to start learning how to see plans and read code in 3 dimension. Yeah. Was by physically hand doing these models, and every single foot, I'm cutting a new line. So I really understood what that foot meant. And there wasn't one of those what were they, what was the
foam
board?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, foam core.
Not one of those models doesn't have a boatload of my blood inside. Right? You guys must have done the same thing too.
Yeah, definitely.
I love, especially not being someone that was educated in that was how I learned it.
Yeah.
Right?
There is something about the involvement of the decision making, using your hands and trying to understand something conceptual in your head while looking at it as a physical object, and making models. We learned that in school when we got trained, and it really was a design tool. And the fact that we don't use it now, we do that on the computer with the 3D models in a similar way, but you don't get that connection or that decision of, do I cut this piece? Do I glue it there? It's a little bit more detached in some ways.
Did you have a clear vision for what you wanted the house to be from the beginning, or did that vision evolve over time during design and things like that?
So there's a couple of answers to that, right? One, each property in the hills of LA, the topography actually designs the house quite a bit, right? Mm-hmm. And because of my code knowledge, I'm able to, have an understanding of what this property was going to roughly look like in its envelope, right? Its 3D envelope to, cut within those lines. So we knew it was going to be a very long house. It's over a half-acre property, and it's nearly a football field long, but it's not super deep, right? Mm-hmm. So I knew it was going to be a really long property. Then I also have this really wonderful neighbor that lives above me, who I didn't want to block his view. So that's why you see the motor court and the single-story garage on his side where he is, and then it jumps up to 2 stories on the area past his viewpoint, right? And that was very intentional. One of the things in LA, and I'll digress for one moment, LA doesn't protect views. It doesn't make sense to me. It's really crazy. I've seen really wild amounts of money thrown between neighbors to protect views. Mm-hmm. And I think that, everyone, especially in the hills, there's someone that lives below you. Right? Yeah. So it's pretty good to, treat someone the way you want to be treated. So the first thing on this project was understanding the dimensions based on code, then understanding my neighboring surroundings, right? Because the last thing you want, especially my knowledge of how this works, is a neighbor that doesn't want your project. That is detrimental to any project.
You want them to bring you cookies and not attorneys.
We're close. He's cool. You know, he might have been the person that just walked upstairs to grab a cocktail at the pool. I'm not sure. He's got the key. He can come anytime. Dr. West, he's a neurosurgeon at Cedar Sinai. Wonderful human. And so, you know, that was a component. And then from the design philosophy, I knew that I wanted, I'll say two things. One, I'm so into the thin profile edge, right?
Of the roof.
Yes. You look at mid-century architecture, even my house, which has a flat roof, the depth, it can't even be a foot.
Yeah.
Right? And it's so thin and light the way that it comes off. And so much of architecture in the last decade has become such a thick profile. And it's actually not because it's different. It's that my structure on my mid-century home only had the structure in the ceiling, and basically that's it.
Yeah.
Right? Now you have these giant steel beams because of the cantilevers. You have your MEP systems that are running through it, and you need these plenum depths. And so basically, you know, architects have just taken what mid-centuries did, and they just took the same profile out, except they grew because of structural, right? And so, you know, someone like Lautner also did things where it came to a razor edge, or someone like Chad Oppenheim, who the Michael Bay house is like one of my absolute favorite homes, the one that he did in Bel Air. And I think you see a lot of inspiration from that on this house. And then the final inspiration for the edge profile, which I think is the primary architectural feature of this home, is from the Japanese architect Kido Saki, who did one of our clients' homes in Japan that looks at Mount Fuji, and the way that he deconstructed this eave. And if anyone looks up Kido Saki, there's this brilliant home that he did in Japan that looks at Mount Fuji, and there's this video, and it shows this deconstructed roof edge. So even though it has the same thickness, it's got like a cut-in planter with gravel in it, and then goes back up with the steel, and then comes back up with a layer of stone, and then comes back, because you can't change how thick our profiles are inside the house, right?
Yeah.
We have a certain amount of depth that we need. But once you get to the window at the edge, we can go to a cantilever, right? And we can deconstruct these edges. So what you see on this house is the deconstructed edge of that razor edge plus the bronze strip to, you know, take it to another level of deconstruction, and then making it contemporary by doing the LED lighting around this bronze. So you get this bronze to the black wood, which was inspired by one of my favorite movies is Ex Machina. And that house is, you know, number one, the movie is like so dramatic, right? And when you see his house, you're like, what? This guy is such a baller. And it's a real home.
Yeah.
I think somewhere in like Finland, I think.
It's somewhere in Europe, yeah.
Yeah. And so that black wood, the shushugiban, Japanese burnt wood, is actually one of the materialities of the house, right? We found that same one. So I knew that I wanted the razor edge, the black wood from Ex Machina, and then, of course, any project I'm part of, it's got to have a James Bond feel to it, right? So this one is inspired off of Thunderball. And in fact, the entity that owns the property is called Discovolante Partners, right?
Right.
And Discovolante was the yacht of the Spectre Syndicate in Thunderball, the one that separates. And Discovolante also spanned in Italian flying saucer.
Yeah.
And Brandon, my partner, you know, he knows that the aliens have visited us. He may be one himself. Many people think that about him, and it's not totally unexpected. So there's a lot of the James Bond innuendo in the home. And so, you know, to be, you know, this very sensual, tropical, very in worldly travel vibes, right? the house is very James Bond in its like rugged character, right? So you take those philosophies and then you work around what you have in terms of the home. And those are some of the things that really started the house. And I think that's kind of the foundation of the creativity and the vision we had. And then from there, you just build layer upon layer upon layer on that. And we had a really talented designers on it. You know, first it was Built, who does a lot of hospitality projects for H-Wood Group, you know, Delilah and Nice Guy and Bird Streets. That you see some similarities here from there. And then Victoria Gillette took over on interior design. And she's, you know, number one, she's French. So anyone French has an extra level of design credibility in my eyes.
You said it, not me.
I'll say it all day. I mean, it is, number one, it's the best place. I love France and Paris specifically. So to be able to bring that touch into here as well, you know, these European, you know, sensibilities and, you know, make something that felt like we talked about earlier on, alive, soul, all these things that bring the home character and uniqueness to them. But then we wanted to have fun with the house, right? We're sitting in a room that's the, you know, library cocktail lounge. And it has, you know, a secret passageway into a nightclub, you know, which is a pretty swanky nightclub. You know, there's 6 disco balls, green velvet ceilings,
Poker table,
gold
mirrored
inset
walls.
ceiling, mirrored walls inspired by Club Babylon from Scarface. So, like, you know, we're taking all these different things. A DJ booth that has Tiger Onyx backlit. I mean, it's pretty good.
Can you imagine this house being in the next James Bond movie?
Oh my God, that'd be so
Wouldn't
cool.
that be
Are you
super
kidding?
cool?
You just planted the seed.
Are you kidding?
You just
I
planted
don't know
the
if
seed.
anyone out there is looking for a house for the new James Bond movie. I mean, that would be like...
I mean, it really does fit the personality and could certainly, you know, be in it.
Yeah.
And I'm very excited to see where the James Bond, you know, franchise goes. I thought the last one was honestly just a remarkable movie. I thought it was so well done.
Yeah.
But those are, you know, some of the foundational thought processes. And then also through mine and our partners, you know, understanding of floor plan, I think it's one of the things Vantage is actually really talented at. You know, we guided a lot of the architectural movements. You know, I really wanted my specific edge profile, but they helped bring it to life. But floor plan, you know, Russ, their principal, is really smart with floor plan. And the floor plan of this house is very, very good. You know, you come into this home and each room is very proportionate in its size, and the flow and the way you go through the house is very, you know, logical. And I think that the size of the home, which is, you know, around 13,000 square feet, obviously that's massive, right? You know, mine's 4 or 5. It's not like, and that's big, you know, but it doesn't feel overwhelming. It feels generous, but it's because, you know, square footages are deceptive these days. You know, if you're used to growing up in traditional homes or in your neighborhood growing up from wherever you are, like a big home in your where you grew up was like 4,000 or 5,000 square feet, right? And it felt big. Yeah. But it's because those rooms were really small and really segmented. Modern architecture has just become so big in every room space that the square footage just adds up. Yeah. You know? Yeah. And the home, even though it flows so well. So obviously there's a couple things that are timeless. You know, materiality, landscape, view, and floor plan. You know, floor plan, it doesn't get more important, right? And the way this house lays out, it's actually funny. The length of the main level is the same length as my home.
Oh,
really?
Yeah. And that main area is 70 feet long, except, you know, mine fits in a kitchen in that area, where ours, we took it and we put it in the back. Yeah. So you gain that extra area for the having the living room and family room being bigger with the dining room as well. And then the divider of the fireplace to those two rooms is actually the same as at my home, except that you moved the kitchen into the back of the family room here. So I actually was at my house doing these measurements because I love my layout. It's so great.
Yeah.
And, these mid-century architects were so brilliant.
Yeah.
You go to these
Super
homes,
efficient.
the reason that besides them being historic and protected, the reason people don't change them, the layouts are so good.
Yeah.
The scale is smaller, right? Even though this is the same length, the depth is so much bigger at this house than mine, but it still serves the same functions as what those homes did in the past. And I think you can learn so much from these mid-century houses in the way that they're laid out. And you see it, in all these great modern architectures, in the best modern houses of this era too, that I think will stand the test of time, even though I think materiality may change and people will come in and do remodels to some of these development projects. But the ones that have good floor plan are going to be, here for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the bones of the project. So if you got good bones, like you can always change the skin that wraps it up, but the bone is the essence. Every time we have a new project coming in or a client, a remodel, new construction, the floor plan is the first thing that we look at because you can have the nicest finishes, the best custom furniture. If the floor plan sucks, the home won't feel good.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely true. It's an interesting observation you made though about this house and its square footage, because when you said it's 13,000,
Yeah, it doesn't feel like
it kind of surprised me. I mean, now that I think about the 3 levels, it makes sense, but it kind of surprised me because it doesn't feel that way in a positive way, though. It feels it's very grand and spacious, but it feels very comfortable. Like one of my beefs with a lot of large contemporary modern houses is that they're just big vacuous spaces and there's no finesse to it, right? It's just a big
sterile
box. Yeah, exactly. It's a big box room with a floating kitchen in the middle or whatever. And actually, a lot of people also have the same clients, non-architects. They just don't feel. It doesn't feel right? Because there's no finesse, no detail, and it's sterile. But this one, despite the main level being as big as it is, it doesn't feel that way. It feels like you could be here for hours and not get bored of it and feel comfortable too.
Yeah, I mean, I hosted a friends and family thing, and we had a brokers party after the big broker awards. There's a really wonderful party here, but I had one as well, as kind of a celebratory completion of the house, and it entertains so well, right, with a lot of people. However, when I'm here by myself, I also feel really comfortable.
Yeah.
Because I come and hang out at night or whatever during the day, and it's just me and my dog. Ranger should have come today, but we're just hanging out, and it feels comfortable in this space. Whereas I do think a lot of houses that we've worked on historically, I don't know if I'd feel that way being in it without a lot of people around me, because I almost feel like some of these houses, they need to come with a group of friends or like staff that's really intrusive.
Yeah.
Oh, a lot of pets.
Yeah. So, we tried, it is great the way it feels that way. And I think a lot of this comes into the experience of working on thousands of projects, even though in a smaller capacity, and walking through so many of them, and just having a passion and understanding of real estate and having access to go visit houses that aren't just for sale, but are end user homes.
Yeah.
Right. I get to tour homes that are some of the grandest homes in the world, on a weekly basis for my entire adult life.
Yeah.
Right. And so I'm taking data, and I think that, I've said this before, this house looks like it's very creative, right? Artistic. I don't know if I'm natural. I've never been I never thought I'd be creative naturally growing up. I was always very analytical and technical and precision, but I think the creativity is based on a formula now, right? And I think that I've taken things from different projects and created this mathematical algorithm of what the formula is for creativity and warmth and character and those things. And it's come from data collection, which, I wish I could sell because data is the most valuable thing these days. Maybe I'd buy the house and not let anybody live here. But I think that's really been a fun part of it. And then you go upstairs, and another thing that I see lacking in a lot of homes is in the master or primary suite, as we call it now, where it needs to be the focal point right? It needs to be way beyond the other rooms. And it's because, look, that's your space. If it's your house, it really needs to take over and have a massive impact, right? And so we did that with very generous closet spaces. You said you loved one of them. I said, look, this other one, perfect for me.
I'll take the other one too. No problem.
They're pretty great. And, making it also a statement piece with,
these
burnt
walls are
orange
beautiful.
suede walls. Pretty cool. The big green onyx bathroom, right? All throughout there. Great privacy, huge views, TV that drops down from the ceiling, all the toys. And then, of course, Marina's favorite, our circular silk bed.
I have to say, this bed needs to be changed to be a waterbed. That is the only cherry on the cake that this house is missing, is you got to change it to a waterbed. It's rotating, it's beautiful, it has this gorgeous view, and it's not a waterbed.
It's not satisfied with it just rotating. It also has to be waterbed rotating.
It's a circular bed,
there should be a water slide from the second floor into the...
you might need to do a remodel.
I actually think a water slide would be cool.
You might need to do a remodel.
But yes, actually waterbed was thought of, and I wonder if the motor's strong enough to move that weight, because that would be pretty cool.
It would be pretty heavy, yeah.
And also... I would not want a waterbed spilling and then flooding 3 floors, but I do think it's a great idea. And that, that primary suite, it's got that extra outdoor patio with a fire pit off to the side, all the landscape, another set of binoculars, pool pockets. It's really fun. The binoculars are fun.
The binoculars are
cool.
fun, and you would not expect them to be like in a private home, but it kind of makes sense. I mean, you have such great views everywhere.
Yeah.
Of course, you want to be able to zoom in and see those buildings you see, from afar, much closer.
David was admiring Noah Walker, who's one of the great architects as well of our time. Is just finished a project across the hill.
Crazy house.
And David was using the binoculars to check it out and just was blown away by the design.
What is that roof made of?
It's really a beautiful home. Really and he's someone that you should definitely have on the pod. And boy, it'd be an honor to do a development with him too. But there's so much talent in our field. It's really exciting.
It is.
And LA's always been, of course I got to plug the wildlife ordinance while I'm here. But just to finish on the house, it's been a great experience. I'm so proud of what we were able to create here. And I'm appreciative of the responses in the feelings back. And can't even put into words how much I'm looking forward to someone moving in here and appreciating it themselves. I think that whoever does get the place is going to really feel a connection to the land, to the design, and really feel a level of life quality in this space that will be worth, the very, high number that it's worth. Yep. And, this next chapter of this project selling and the next one's building, and Crest continuing to be more experienced in what we can offer is really, something that I'm looking forward to. I know my brother is as well. And, hopefully we'll be back for the next chapter again. Yeah. But, finishing on how much talent there is in this industry, and LA itself is this architectural beacon for where architecture has really thrived throughout our modernist history, right? Because LA is a young city. Yeah. But it's because of the topography, because of our climate, right? To be able to have these glass houses that pocket, to have the economic viability to spend the level of money to do cutting edge architecture where it makes sense. It's items that come together in a very few places in the world, right? And, it's important to keep that going. There have been problems with what's been built in the hills. We were the permit expediters and co-consultants for the One, right? The biggest house in the country. Although the new owner is doing a great job making that house a really fine building and has done the necessary things to, bring it up to what it needs to be, we were very aware that doing something that large with that kind of exemption on grading wasn't sustainable in the industry. So in 2017, the city of LA changed their codes and limited basements, right? Which was the primary issue with the one of how large that was. Yeah. And, they limited it to a size where now houses that are being built, this is pretty maxed out under that, but it doesn't feel obnoxious to the site, right? And many of the others that are being built don't either, and are also able to be built with pretty efficient construction timelines. What the wildlife ordinance that's been proposed in LA is doing, it eliminates basements entirely, which because of the square footages that we're allowed to build above ground, the basements are really important. It's typically on most projects that you're designing and we're designing and permitting are, 30-40% of the building.
It doesn't feel like a basement too. No. For people listening who don't understand that, it's technically a basement, but it's just another level of the house, and you get massive exposure to the exterior. It's a third of the actual house, not just some basement that you go down to every once in a while.
Yeah, and then they're also, so they're taking that away 100%, and then they're taking away your credit for your sloped area on the property, which in most properties is, 20% of their allowable above ground RFA, right? Yeah. And they're doing this in kind of a silo where people weren't really aware of it, which I think is the biggest problem, and that the city didn't do, I think, enough proper case study research with architects. Planning in its own silo can be very, good in its intention, sometimes poor in its execution, if you don't study it in its result architecturally. And so when you do study the wildlife ordinance, which is not about wildlife, because it's so hard to say you're against the wildlife ordinance. I hate saying that. Yeah. I'm pro wildlife. Yeah. Right? I love nature. Look at all the plants and trees that we have in this house. Right? And, love the ocean and love all these things. It's part of the fabric of what makes Los Angeles great. There's a lot of wonderful things in the ordinance about wildlife that should be approved and be approved fast. Right? If they would have kept it to those things, this would already be done. It'd be approved. And it would be celebrated on both sides. And this is the problem with politics these days. Why does everything have to be so bipartisan? Yeah. Right? Why can't we come to solutions that both people, everyone can agree to? And look, most of everybody is left. So it's not really truly bipartisan in this case, but it is definitely, I think, very misguided on why people are trying to support the removal of square footage under a wildlife ordinance. So make the wildlife ordinance about wildlife. A basement underneath even what we've proposed to change the ordinance to, which actually would eliminate daylight basements, which I think is okay. Beverly Hills did it. I think it's okay. These basements have gotten really big. It's okay if things get a little bit shrunken down in the future, because this is part of the most time intensive part of construction, to eliminate part of that. But you need to have some of your functions in the basement, right, with these houses, because you don't have that much RFA above ground. And so, and plus, how does basement underneath the footprint of a building affect wildlife? I still don't understand that.
It's for the worms. What are you talking about? For the worms in the dirt. And no, I think it's a cop out.
The worms' lives matter. So
worms' lives matter. But it's a T-shirt.
Earthworm Jim. That was one of my favorites. I always try to push the worms back into the planter after a rainy day. I'll pick them up out. Anyways, but I digress. That the code, they should make it if they want to do it as a revision to the baseline hillside ordinance, that seems transparent and a fair process. But wildlife ordinance that talks about building sizes so much is the major impact of this ordinance, but a small component of the length of the ordinance. Right. But it's the biggest impact. It should really be separated out and done on its own accord and its own merit. Right. That people should cohesively agree that that's where it should go, and people should cohesively agree and hopefully celebrate all these wildlife things. There's a lot of really valid points in there, and the problem is there's so much opposition now that, look, this thing's not going to get approved, if it gets approved, until next year. Right? So we've already wasted all this time where we could already have done the protections for some of the things that do matter.
Yeah.
Right. So that'd just be, it's a big thing in the industry. I was very surprised early on at the apathy, and I was very disappointed, honestly, if I may vent, in the architects, builders, engineers not getting involved to speak up against it when we all knew what an impact it would have. And now people have really gotten into a group setting to have a cohesive voice and try and talk about reasonable adjustments. But, it would destroy construction of new homes in the hills almost entirely. And to me, that would be really sad, because architecture in the hills of Los Angeles has been trend setting for generations now. Yeah. And I would like to think that generations in the future could do projects in the Los Angeles hills that are aspirational and trend setting design wise and lifestyle wise for the world. And I think that it's really important to make sure we preserve those things in reasonable settings and with discussions with architects, engineers, and the planning department. Mm-hmm. So anyways, that is my statement on something that I think is really overly important and a bit overlooked in our industry, because look at all the jobs that come out of just one house, right? They're their own microeconomies. Yeah. And it's not just the architect. It's the engineers, it's the interior designers, it's the agents, it's the contractors, the subcontractors, the laborers, all of these people. I mean, God knows how many people were employed, gainfully employed through a project even of this size, right? And, I think that it's really important for us to fight towards maintaining these jobs and the artistry that's able to occur in our city.
Why do you think that it's been rolled into one thing? Is it just a lack of oversight, or is it an intentional way to pass that part of it, you think?
You can say it.
I'll speculate and say that. Yeah. That would be my guess. That would be my guess.
LA City, we can end on what we said before, but it's remarkable that LA, such a big city, is able to run as efficiently as it does in building and safety. Yeah. It runs more efficiently than smaller cities that we work in. It's remarkable. Yeah. I mean, I applaud their efforts, and I don't think enough credit goes to all of the cities in our area for staying open during COVID, right? The construction industry was one of the only things that was really feeding the lifeblood of our economy in this city, because entertainment was closed, hospitality was closed, food and dining was closed, shopping, everything was all closed, right? But construction stayed going, and it was the people at City Hall that continued to push for that. And so, even though I have issues on how that independent policy was done, overall, how our local government works from the building department standpoint and is very impressive. Yeah.
Yeah.
I do think you should put on the sales contract that the owner needs to buy a waterbed. Otherwise, they can't buy it.
Fair. Done. I'll pay for it.
And then if there is water damage, well, that's on him after that.
Yeah, but I'm signing a disclosure.
Beyond that, but thanks for having us over. First and foremost, congratulations on the project. Obviously remarkable. And thanks for making the time to also chat with us for a few hours. This was a lot of fun, and we'll do it again in the future.
Thank you both.
Thank you, everybody, for listening to this week's episode. If you like what we're doing and want to support the show, then you can leave us a review in the Apple Podcast app. You can also find us on Spotify and YouTube to like, rate, and comment, and whatever. The show also has an Instagram, which is Second Studio Pod. We have about 80-something thousand followers, so join the cult and leave comments and questions on there and engage in dialogue.
Yeah, we also have those amazing stickers that we've made. One is green, and it says, "This is good architecture." One is red, and it says, "This is bad architecture." Yeah. So if you want to tell the world what is good and what is bad in architecture wise.
So where would someone buy these stickers? You should get
our stickers. Our stickers are available on our website, secondstudiopod.com. If you click on, I think, the shop or merch tab. You will find them there. There's other goodies out there if you're looking to support the show. That's more of a fun way to support the show than really, helping us produce this episode.
Buy some stickers, and you could use those stickers and stick them on buildings.
Or people.
We don't condone graffiti and vandalism.
You can stick them on people.
So we're not responsible for whatever you do with the stickers.
Yeah.
What else is going on? We have more guests coming up, more great things. We have a hotline, so you can text us with questions or topic suggestions. And the hotline is 213-222-6950. You can find our office fame, which is everywhere too. And that's it. We'll talk soon. Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.